Today we'll be talking about the master data import process. What that'll allow you to do is import from Excel some data that will allow you to create custom hierarchies, and that kind of goes in line with what a user-controlled attribute is. We'll talk a little bit about what both of those things are today. We'll talk about the setup criteria. We'll look at an Excel format example and see how we can use that to create our new dimension. We'll step through the master data import process menus. It's pretty simple. And then we'll talk about, we'll actually show this. So I'll actually go in and show you some of the menus and how it would look like to feasibly create a new dimension from an Excel file, an attribute. And we'll field any questions after the demo. Feel free to contact us at any time, of course. Today's lesson will be falling in line with the Stratum Analyst Hub down in the lower left-hand side. You can see that last time we were here, we talked about the spreadsheet import of the actual data. So we actually imported some sales plan data into Stratum, but this time we'll be talking about importing master file related data, such as an attribute field, which will then allow you to create a hierarchy on that on the fly. It's quite nice. We'll take a look about how we'll set that up. So as you can see, that's part of our Stratum Analyst Hub strategy. You would need a license to the Analyst Hub in order to gain access to this particular utility. So what is this stuff that we talk about? User control attribute and master data import. What are these things? Well, essentially the user controlled attribute is essentially something that the user controls, amazingly enough. It's an attribute that the user can actually control and create. So they'll be able to come in and import a Excel file and create on their own a hierarchy based on a file that they have maintained perhaps over the years, or something that they can create on the fly if they wanted to, and start categorizing the data accordingly. So in this case, if we wanted to add in, our theme today is to add in a new product grouping. We can group the products however we want based on that file that we put together. So this concept of a user-controlled attribute, well, that needs to be defined, right? So typically the viewer administrator would go in and define the attribute for the target dimension. For instance, our target dimension would be product, and then our attribute will be a custom marketing product group that we'll be creating today. The master data, once that's set up, then you can have the user go in and execute the actual data import. And then that's the piece that they'll go in and utilize the import process and map the data into Stratum. Of course, this data will be in an Excel file. So we would expect that the Excel file would have the appropriate data in it for the target dimension and also for the new attribute. So who has access to this? I alluded to the licensing a little bit earlier, but if you're on a named user license, you have full access to this. So you're covered. If not, if you're on a core or a server-based license, then you would need to purchase a license, the Stratum Analyst Hub license, and you can certainly discuss that with me. If you have a planning license, perhaps you purchased a planning license for viewer in the past, that also covers you as well. So that's something that you can use to gain access to this particular utility. This also has to be on a SQL Server implementation. So if you're running Stratum on an iSeries or an AS400, basically the same thing, you unfortunately cannot take advantage of this. So that's something that you can also discuss with me offline if you'd like, and we can talk about how to get you to SQL Server. And then finally here, you have to be on version 7.2. So that is required. That's the release that that contains this incredible feature. Who can access these controls, these menus? It's a lot like last time we talked about the data import. Only your security and view administrators have full access to the functionality. The administrators actually have the user control attribute option in their left panel for access. So really, at the end of the day, it's the administrators that are creating and maintaining these user controlled attributes as they get set up. That doesn't mean they're doing the imports, just means that they're doing the necessary setup for the attributes for the users to do the import. So who does the import? Well, the view administrators would have full permission to that. So it's basically your power users. Again, advanced and casual users certainly can access some of the features here if you give them direct access to that menu. And then they can only work with the data imports that they own. So similar to last session with the data import, you could open this up to the other advanced and casual users out there as well, if you choose to do so. But it's not really designed out of the box for that per se, but there is ways to do that. Okay, so basically here's the user controlled attribute menu. So essentially playing the role here of the security administrator, coming in to my admin utilities, I select my user controlled attribute option there, and I'm setting up, got contacted by marketing. They want me to set up a product marketing group code. So I go in, I select my target dimension, which is product in this case. I name the attribute product marketing group code, and then I give it a default value of a question mark, which is typically the default that we use in Stratum. The toggle to create a hierarchy would be yes or no, obviously here. In this case, we're saying, yeah, not only do I want to load this in as an attribute to product, but I also want it to be able to aggregate upon it as its own dimension. So in that case, I would say yes to create a hierarchy. And then what would, in that case, then what would the hierarchy name be? And that has to be unique. So this cannot be the same as the attribute name itself. And it cannot be the same as any other hierarchy in Stratum. So here's where you'll go ahead and name the hierarchy and level name, which will typically be the same. The hierarchy and level is typically the same name here. So, okay, so in that case, you're able to save that and select and then open it up to the users to import the data. Before they even get to that point, they have to create the file. So in this case, I can look at my example file here. It includes the primary dimension here, which is the target dimension, which is product. And as you can see, I've got all my product numbers. As a matter of fact, I use actually Viewer to create this file, of course. And then I do have the long description here, although it's not required. It is there for me, for my viewing pleasure. And then also I've got my column there for my new hierarchy. So this is that attribute that I'm adding. This is that user controlled attribute that I am importing now into Stratum. And I'm marrying these codes up to each one of these items. And as you can see, some of the items have a certain code to them and the others have a different code to them. And all in all, I know this file because it's my demo file that I created. I've got 2 distinct product codes, marketing codes here. So I should be able to aggregate upon them once I get this processed, right? So very simple example, something that you could put together here very quickly, but yet very powerful end result here, and you'll see in a minute. All right, so now that the file's ready to go, what do we do next? We come into our master data import menu. And again, you can open this up. The view administrators would be able to do this, but certainly once you give this access to the other users, they would be able to come here and do that as well. So I select that menu and I go into my master data import menu. It has some jobs there that are already processed. So in this case, if I wanted to create a new import, I can then click on the new button to then go in and create my new import. And I can also select the, for these past jobs, I can actually select a report to see how those processed as well. As you can see, they all completed. The button right next to the add master data import job allows you to see those reports. Here, in this case, I'm selecting new. Immediately, it prompts you for the file. It says, okay, where's the file? Go find it and select it. So my file's out there. I select my file that I just showed you, and then that becomes that gets imported into the designer, which then I'm then allowed to go ahead and make the necessary mappings. So here I can then go in, select and map, and it should smart map just like we saw last time. Some of the, if you have more than other attributes here, because you could do more than one here, it should smart map. But nevertheless, go in and make sure and verify that you're mapping in the products here, and my new code obviously is mapped accordingly. And of course, I'm ignoring the long description column, because that, we're not really physically loading the descriptions. We're just, those are already there, or, so we don't, that gets loaded every night. So that's not something we're concerned about. Okay, so we go in and that gets mapped. What do we do next? Well, a couple things to take notice of here before we kick off the process, and that would be our configuration. So how are we going to, what type of job are we going to kick off here? We have a choice to make in terms of our import option. And as you can see, it can be an update versus a replace. So what do we do here? The update is going to be the more common type of import. It's the default, actually. So if you want to update existing data, and then if there's new attributes in there and you want to add them in as well, then this is the way to go. If you have nothing, or I'm sorry, if you have a replace, maybe you did something and you goofed up, maybe the codes were wrong and you want to do a complete replace. That would, obviously a replace would be the way to go. Now, just keep in mind here, it clears out the existing data for all of the user controlled attributes for that level. So for instance, if you have maybe a different job that imported an attribute for that product level, that you'll have to re-import that, right? So just keep that in mind as well. That's why you probably want to just choose one file to do it in one fell swoop for multiple attributes. So once the configuration gets defined and configured, we're ready to kick this thing off. So, how do we do that? Well, we can have we kick it off and we verify it by using our process and our verify buttons up in the menu. Pretty easy to see and find there. I'll show you where they are. It'll tell you if you have any issues. It'll bark at you, of course, and you'll get an email. So once you have your data is imported, again, this runs real time. You don't have to wait overnight for this thing. So this will send an email in a few minutes and let you know, hey, your import process is completed and you're ready to go. So what does that look like? Well, now we can come in, run a view, add in our new dimension, our new product marketing group code there, and voila, sure enough, we're able to aggregate on those two distinct codes that were in my file. And as I drill that down, I would be able to see how that dispersed across my products, of course. We'll see that in a few minutes. Okay, so if you're interested in this, if you want to schedule anything to discuss this, call me, email me, contact us. We have lots of information out there, and our YouTube channel is live and ready to go. Subscribe to it. Okay, so let's look at the demo. What are we going to do here? Well, what we want to do is basically import and create that new product marketing dimension. So let's take a look at some of these menus. Here's viewer. We have it up and running here, the latest and greatest, version 7.2. We want to go in and take a look at that user controlled attribute. So here we're actually going in and we're taking a look at, how does this thing get set up, right? So in this case, we can see that we have the product marketing group code there set up. It's already there. Let's go inside and edit that thing to see what it looks like here. Sure enough, it's just like the presentation. We can see that indeed the target dimension, the primary dimension here is product. But as you can see, I can pull that down. I can select anything, all the dimensions here that I have access to. Well, I'm the security administrator, so they'll have access to anything, which is probably why they want you to be a security administrator here. Next would be the name of the actual attribute. So here I can name it as, again, as long as it's unique, you'll be good to go here. The default value, question mark, create a hierarchy, digital answer there, yes or no. Typically you're going to, it all depends, I guess, but I normally would want to turn that on, and then you can enjoy the benefits of aggregating upon that new attribute. There's the name of the new hierarchy. If I turn that on, I need to provide a hierarchy name and level name. And again, those can be the same, but it cannot be the same as this guy up here, the attribute name itself. So, normally I could just append the target dimension in front of it as well, just to kind of say, okay, this is the attribute in the product dimension, from the product dimension. All right, that is set up and ready to go. Now we're ready to do our import. So, I can then go in, select my master data import menu. It then shows me some of the things that have already been processed. So if I wanted to see that report, I can click on the get report button there. It downloads on the bottom, and then I'm able to actually open that. We can take a look at that report. We can see what the report contains. Here I've got a lot of good information about the actual job, this different steps that it went through, completion time and date stamps. Looks like the final email got sent, everything completed successfully. Let's take a look at the import process. So now we're actually ready to go ahead and create a new import. We'll go ahead and click on the new import button. There's my attribute import products file that I will want to use here. I will then select that. It will then import the data, or a preview of it at least, into the designer. Here's where I can do my mapping. So here I can map it as a dimension, an attribute, or ignore. So obviously, yes, this is my product dimension. It is a dimension, of course. So those two things have to be mapped. It mapped pretty easily. As you can see, it mapped automatically. I don't really need to do anything here. Nevertheless, reviewing that, indeed, we're ignoring the long description here. Next is our attribute. This is the bread and butter of what we're trying to do here is in this column. So we're deeming that as an attribute, of course, and what will show up here is the actual name that we named it in the setup under the user controlled attribute menu back when we were a menu prior. Pretty simple, pretty simple. If I wanted to then configure that, I can then go into my configuration menu. I can set this up as update or replace. That's where I'm going to decide what kind of job I'm going to run there, right? So here we can see that, I can then do an update or replace. My target dimension, I've only got 2 set up here as product or product group. And that's going to depend on how many user controlled attribute things that I set up and how many target dimensions that I have there. So that's what drives that, what shows up in that menu. How many header columns do I have, or header rows, I should say, sorry, in my file, and I only have 1. Let's validate it and see if it likes the file. It looks good. It's ready to process. I'm ready to kick this thing off. It then warns me, this could take some time. Do you want to do this? And I'm going to go ahead and cancel it. It's already been processed. You'll hear a ding once you process. Your email comes in, your email ding happens, and voila, you're ready to come in and run the view and see the end result of what it is you just accomplished. So in this case, I'm running a view coming into my comparative sales view here, I can see that, well, it comes in at division level. I'm looking at my classic this year versus last sales view. And notice that there's my new product grouping. It's dimension. It's already there, of course, because it's part of my demo. But if it's not, you'll be able to add it in accordingly here. I guess a couple things to mention here as well would be, security, just to make sure that the users can see this dimension. A few things might get in your way here, so just a few things just to keep in mind. All right, and then here, what we want to do is drag and drop this new dimension over here. So now I have the ability to drill to my new dimension. I can then drill from division to my product marketing code, and indeed, there it is. And it's aggregated as you can see. It's quite nice. If I want to drag and drop product to be my next level down, then I can see how this is broken out by product, and it should obviously match my file. Of course, in the file you'll see all those products belonging to the 12380K, and then of course these other items belonging to 456 FCB. So, and then for the grocery division and the different breakouts there. Quite nice. I just created my own dimension. I just created an aggregation of how my products should be aggregated based on what is important to me and my marketing department. So now I can track and aggregate these marketing programs accordingly. So pretty simple. A lot of information on this. There's a bit more processing options on the back end to discuss and review, but certainly that's something that can be discussed during implementation and training. It's very simple to get up and running. The training is essentially minimal at most, and this is something that you can enjoy the benefit pretty quickly once you get the hang of how to do this, which again is pretty simple. Don't forget that your help menu is up here, so you can actually go in and take advantage of the menu options. If you do a search in the help menu under master data, it will bring up all the different options here, which essentially would bring you to your help area for this topic. Here you can see all the different things we talked about: who gets access to what, how do we add in a user-controlled attribute to Stratum. It'll step you through those concepts. It'll introduce you to what this thing is, how does it work. It's a nice read. It really is very educational and logical to go through. And normally you can step through this and really kind of educate yourself on your own.